All right, guys, we are live for episode 153 of the show.
Wow.
I know it feels like we've done a lot more since episode 150, but anyway, we're here, and today we have, I guess it's IFBB, Natural Pro, Bodybuilding, Austin Current. Welcome to the show.
What's up? Thank you.
And fourth time in Sydney and having a blast. So I hear.
Yeah, man, it's good. Sydney's good. So like when we lived over here in 2017, we lived on the Gold Coast, and that was super good. And then we traveled around a bit, did the Great Ocean Road, and lived in a van and kind of did everything in between and
live that nomad lifestyle.
Did you just go like full into the wild once you quit competing in bodybuilding? That's what I'm picturing. You went out, you had the
grew
book.
that beard.
Yeah, I just grew the beard. I got really primal with it. No, man, I think so. What really changed course is for context, like I turned pro when I was 20,
which is crazy considering it was like pro in IFBB. It wasn't like a local ICN show or something like that.
Yeah, and I think I would chalk it up to being at the right place at the right time, and I got very fortunate, I think, where they liked my look, which, as you were saying, like the sport itself is very subjective, and it really comes down to, do they like your look? Do they like your structure, your dimension, and like your tapers and your muscle bellies, and just like how they perceive you is so obviously it's very subjective, but it's everything to the sport. And I think it was just the right place at the right time, and it happened so fast for me, and I got a little bit lost when it all happened, because it was like from start, I want to start competing, let's train for it, to turning pro. It all happened in 9.5 months.
Oh wow! So the base was effectively laid down,
Jesus.
right?
Yeah.
Like by the time you decided to
cool were
compete.
your genetics? Were you just like that man child at school? Like, have you had this beard since you were 12?
Ironically enough, the beard has been a late bloomer, much like my intelligence, but
Still waiting for mine.
My academic, it all comes at different times, man.
Thank you.
You just gotta ask Santa Claus, and he'll bring it one year. But I think, it was kind of delayed. The beard was delayed. I started growing the beard, which I get it trimmed up every few weeks.
You can tell.
Or else,
It's fucking so fresh.
Yeah, the wind took it for a ride, a joyride on the way over here, so it might be a little scrappy, but man, like, where was I? I was talking about
getting in-house, or you had a 9-month prep for your first show,
so
and it all just sort of happened.
Yeah, it all just sort of happened, and I think that goal for me was like, shit, I think I want this. This is like a long-term goal for me, because I was like looking up to guys at the time, like, let's say Matt Kushner's and Steve Cook's, and these guys who were kind of like laid the foundation and foreground for what physique is.
So you started on the bodybuilding.com forums.
Yeah. I wouldn't say like I was like on the forums as a contributor, but much more like just an observer.
Didn't get in on the MISC a little bit?
No, man, I really didn't.
How big was Ziz in back then? Have you heard of Ziz?
Yeah, I have. I think so. I think the biggest exposure to all of that for me was like through like Jeff Seed and that kind of that whole line of people. Like,
you're not boys with Jeff Seed, are you?
No.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's put out some dubious shit.
Yeah, no. I don't know who. So Jeff, like, the only reason I know Jeff is because obviously like he's very popular and famous in terms of being a micro celebrity within the fitness industry. But Jeff Seed was the youngest at the time. I was like, more or less, my goal, like, how cool would it be? Because like at the time, Jeff Seed was the youngest to turn pro. And I think he ended up, I was like kind of at a race of like how cool it'd be to be the youngest to ever turn pro in that category. And I ended up being, at the time, this has since changed, but at the time I was the second youngest to ever turn pro.
Okay, that's solid.
And that was something that was really cool for me. And that was kind of a benchmark, like, marker for me of like, this is what I want out of this time period of life. And I've thought more back to that, and I was just as you chase a lot of physical things at times where, or you become obsessed with things at times where you're trying to fill the void of something else that isn't quite there. You're trying to run away from, and for me at the time was a relationship, and I got super obsessed with bodybuilding and the physique world, and like setting really far out goals that, like I said, ended up happening like way faster than I ever imagined them happening. And honestly, like, I think it got there so fast that when someone thinks about like, oh, it's by the time I like turn pro or gain that status, it's like so much is going to change for me, and like everything's going to be different. And I think it all happened so fast for me that there wasn't enough time or nurturing or kind of, just a time within that for any of that to actually happen. So
well, it sort of builds the want. Like when you set that goal, and like you said, you achieved it in pretty much 9 months, whereas it takes some people years and years and years to get there. So I imagine the satisfaction builds getting there, hence the longer journey, if there's a longer journey.
Well, you saw the same thing with Tyson Fury. Like, he had a pretty rapid rise to fame, and then he kind of was like, I woke up with the belt the next day. It's kind of like, what now? Might as well just do a plate of cocaine and drink heaps of booze.
Yeah,
so it could have gone worse. You found like a good outlet, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, I ran out. So
hold on, Angus, the story's not through. The plates of cocaine might come.
Yeah, that comes later. No, I have not done cocaine. But in terms of where I went after that, so it all happened so fast where that was really, and I was young to the point where my whole identity at the time was like wrapped up in this. So like, this is what I was known for in my town and around like my social networks and even on social media at the time. And all I wanted to do was get away from it. And like we were talking about when you guys were walking me up to the studio today, it was like, oh, do you not really compete anymore? And it's like, I can't say I don't anymore, but I haven't in a few years, because all I've been doing is essentially what I did after I turned pro. I did a couple pro shows.
You got to use the pro card, I guess.
Yeah, and I did a couple pro shows. My last pro show was in 2016.
Okay, so 3 years ago. So you were 23.
Yeah, I was 23 at my last show.
Going up against, what's the average age here?
So there was, it kind of depends. Like, there was another kid on the stage, which lets me know that for being the second youngest, I think he's now the youngest to ever turn pro. He was 19. This dude had crazy genetics. Like, this dude was crazy. His physique was nuts. And he was just a super down-to-earth, cool dude. But after that show, like, that is as a natural dude, like, how can I look like I'm enhanced is the goal, right? So how dry, lean, and full can I be on stage and look like I'm about to explode? And I achieved it, and I got dead fucking last. And
Jeez.
I was just like, and the placing didn't matter to me as much as just like, I was looking at some of the other physiques who did beat me, and I'm just like, and it's not that I got, so in the IFBB, there's only 16 places you can get. There can be 30 guys, but there'll be
16 places. And
there's
then the
16,
rest they don't even tell you.
So you'll be 16 subscript, like, fucking 16. You'll be the 16th place, 16th place. And so, like, I was dead last of the dead last. And I was like, I understand that I may have not won, but I'm not the worst physique out there. Like, really? So I was just like, after that, I was just like, how... I walked off stage, and my parents are super supportive, and my brother and my wife and everyone's super supportive. And my brother and my parents have never missed a show. They've traveled around the U.S. to come to all my shows, and I walked off the stage, and I think they were more concerned with the placing and just upset. And I just walked off and was just like, how do you feel? Are you okay? And I'm just like, yeah. Let's eat, man.
Never bodybuilding again.
Yeah, I was just like, let's eat. Fuck this. Like,
yeah. So you took it pretty well.
Yeah, and I didn't really care at the time, because I kind of like knew that was my last bit, because I was about to graduate university, and we'd already kind of set up the plans or I was about to ask, my wife to about to do the engagement, you know, and ask her to marry me. And it kind of like life took a turn there. But where things really took a turn in my mind was when after I earned my pro card, I did one pro show. And after that one pro show, we actually did fairly well. It cracked the top 10 in my first pro show. It was really cool to do. But again, the fulfillment for me was just not there anymore. And I think I wanted it to be there, and it just wasn't. And again, that's where my identity got really wrapped up in it all. And I was wanting to run away from it. And so basically I ran away to England and took an opportunity to study abroad. And so I was just north of London, and that was like the most exciting 5 months of my entire life. And that's where I met my current wife, and which ironically is from just a state over from where I'm from, and we grew up 30 miles apart, and it was just
Small world.
It was just crazy world. And I got to travel and see different cultures and travel throughout Europe and different Scandinavian countries, and it was just amazing and enlightening. And since then, I did compete one more time, just to kind of be like, let me do it one more time to see if the fulfillment is, or this. I think I was itching for something competitive, and for me, that seems like a good competitive outlet, at least somewhat productive and somewhat healthy.
You never thought about competing and changing sports?
No, not really. I was talking to Luke Tolick this morning, and over breakfast, and I was like, I think I want to be a productive underachiever, honestly. I've always been somewhat of an underachiever in life, in terms of my wants or desires and things. If it's in front of me and I want to get it, I'll obviously work to get it, with the whole competing thing and whatever else. But after that, it's what's the least amount of work I can do to achieve this?
Which is
that's my whole school
in
educational
conflict
career.
with the Gary V hustle and bustle fitness industry.
I
It's
do like
weird
Gary V's
because I feel
point,
like I get around. He gets me revved up occasionally.
Occasionally,
But
until
I have a good relationship with my parents, and he's always tell your dad to get fucked. That's his new thing. I saw one of his posts the other day, and it was the context behind "Go fuck your mother," and I was like, "Wow, I don't even know if I can click on that." He's become a parody of
promoting
himself.
incest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of interesting that you're just more sort of lifestyle focused, and I guess using fitness to then facilitate the lifestyle you want, whereas more people just want more and more and more and more fitness, I guess.
I think it's just a lack of knowing how to transition, because I think going from a physique sport can be really tough, because every training session is predicated on building the best physique possible, right? And being the best on stage and attaining a certain goal and gaining approval of those who don't matter on social media and everything else that we could always go into. But there's so much you're always reaching for there, and every session is predicated on this success. And how did the training session go? Did I get a sick pump? How do I look in the mirror? Can I take a good photo? Will it go well on social? It's a perpetual loop of this awful feedback loop to get into. And yeah, I think I've just been working on over the past couple of years this transition of, I am very knowledgeable when it comes to training and nutrition and educating on the subject matter and understanding that for my clients. But also, I'm really trying to transition in my mental state, for my own mental health, of how can I transition out of the struggle of every session needs to be so great and physique altering that I can just transition to be where I can just go in there. I'm in there for my health. Like I was saying, I've trained 10 times in the last 2 months, because we've been traveling the last 2 months throughout the US. And then we've been in Australia for almost a month now. And I haven't really been near a gym. And if I'm near a gym, I'll out of the 5 days I'm near the gym, I may go 1 or 2. And it's
Mate, if you want to hit a sweet pump tomorrow, my gym's literally 200 meters from here.
yeah, I'll take you up on that offer.
Dad, just let me know.
Sweet.
Maybe we can train together. It's
I'd be
my
curious
easy
to
day
see what the
tomorrow.
Austin
Let's
holiday
build these
workout
pipes.
is. Yeah, what do you just go straight into? You haven't had a
Give us
sesh.
a rundown. You haven't. This is interesting.
Yeah.
You're on holidays. You haven't trained in X
Yeah.
amount of time, what are you doing? Like, considering, let's say, this might be your only session for a week.
Full body, typically.
What are we
and
starting with, though?
Typically, it just depends on what's open, man. Like,
Really? So you're real
Let the gym
free-flowing.
speak to you.
how can get the fuck out of here, basically. Because I was at, what is it? What's this, the gym, the Fitness First?
Fitty first, yeah, bro.
Okay. So, been going to the one over there in Surrey Hills, it starts with a D.
Surrey Hills. Oh, Darlinghurst Fitness First.
Yeah, so I'm saying
We'll
right.
stay out of those mouth changers.
Well,
it's
so
the
They had to
Castro
take the
Street
sauna out of
it's-
that place.
It's the Castro Street of Sydney.
Okay, sweet.
They
So
got frisky.
I've been there twice. I went out there the past couple days, essentially.
We like,
so.
fuck, why am I getting so many dudes looking
Yeah,
at
did
me?
you get a lot of
Yeah.
compliments?
No, there was a lot of staring, I think, but a lot of people stare at my beard.
They're like,
anyways.
yes, a new
Yeah,
bear.
that's a good point.
So a lot of people stare at my beard, anyways. I'm just grateful that people don't touch it that much, but
Keep hanging around
you'd
there,
be
though,
surprised. But anyways, so I'll walk into a gym with the plan in mind of typically I go if I haven't trained, if I know I'm going to train 2 days in a row. Typically when I'm traveling, if I can coordinate 2 days in a row, I try to get at least 2 days in a row. If I know it's just going to be one day, I'll go. I'll typically pair big body parts together. But if I know I'm going to go back-to-back days, and those are my only training sessions for that week, I'll go big, small body parts, pairing
Okay.
those together. So like a chest and tricep, or try to like have an overlapping muscle group there, or chest and shoulders and triceps, hit it like a tricep. My goal just essentially is train a lot of tissue, stimulate a lot of tissue in that one session, and do what I can to help whatever nutrient partitioning, fluid partitioning that I've built up through either sitting on my ass or traveling or being on a plane, or like we took a camper van down here, so I sat my ass in a camper van for the last 5 days essentially. So obviously like it was only like 10 hours to get here, so over 5 days that's not too much of a journey.
Yeah,
but
that's pretty chill.
still, like there were some days, you drive for a few hours a day and you only walk around a bit, you may sit on the beach and read, or you got to answer emails or something. So but typically, yeah, my holiday workouts are typically fueled by trying to train as much tissue as I can, typically full body. If I know I'm going to train 3 to 4 times that week, I'll hit half body. So kind of a
High, low.
yeah, like kind of a maybe, or an anterior posterior day. So I'll hit chest, quads, or I hit everything on the front of the body essentially, and then everything on the back. So back, hamstrings, calves, like
Yeah.
So I kind of break it up that way. On the only caveat on the anterior posterior sessions though is like when I hit the anterior, I'll hit my triceps, and if I hit with posterior, I hit biceps, just because the overlapping.
Yeah.
If I would have hit, if I hit biceps before I hit back, then it's going to be
You'd be toast.
in terms of stabilizing like the elbow and the shoulder, like that's compromised a bit, and then just all pulling from there is kind of compromised. So so I typically break. It just depends on how many days I'm going to foresee me training.
And then that opposed to when you're in full training, let's say if you were going to train for a comp again, are you upping it to like 5 to 6, or are you still keeping it for
No.
recovery?
I'd probably go. I'd go 4 days as long as I possibly could, just trying to elicit as much damage over those days as possible. Typically, and depending on what phase or kind of what stimulus I'm trying to train, but for ease, I don't honestly like beating myself up that much. Again, like, what's the least amount of work for the greatest amount of reward? So I'm, again, going back to the underachiever in me. And I also just think that's smarter in terms of longevity of just your overall health.
Yeah, that was a cool concept I see being discussed a bit more lately. I think Mike Israetel described it as stimulus to fatigue ratio.
Yeah.
And I guess
yeah.
through things like that, because I know rack pulls about 3-4 years ago was such a staple in the bodybuilding meta, but it seems like recently it's sort of come to light that they're probably not an ideal choice for bodybuilders.
Or, I mean, even deadlifts to a sense, right? And I think past the RDL deadlift. So there's an argument for like trap bar deadlifts being great, and the RDL being a great exercise overall, just for usage of a physique sport. But as a whole, I don't see much. Like, I don't think like sumo deadlifts. I don't think conventional deadlifts are great for physique sports.
But a lot of those exercises you just described do really get romanticized and thrown on the pedestal as like king of the lifts.
Yeah, because if they're an iteration or they're a part of the big three, I think that are in most programming, or at least most people's idea of what programming is.
Because king of the lifts is, I guess, big three for any sport or varies. So obviously powerlifting, big three, obviously squat, bench, dead. Sprinting might not be the same.
Do you have a big
Bodybuilding,
three for
different. Yeah.
bodybuilding?
What's the big three for bodybuilding?
That's a good question.
There's plenty more coming, don't worry.
Yeah. So the big three for that's what you guys do, right? You just ask great questions.
Pretty much. We're the best. If I say so myself.
If you do say so myself. Okay, so big three. I don't know. I think you'd have to have, obviously breaking it up, I think you'd have to have something where it'd be hard, because in any big three, I'm trying to think of a combination that would hit most muscle groups, and with only three, maybe a big four.
We can go 4.
I'd call that.
Because in terms of I would break the body up into 4 zones, looking at like kind of the torso musculature, the back, and then again more of the posterior chain, and then more of the quad and stuff like that. So if you could break it up into 4 zones, so I think some sort of personally, I think you could do a lot with flying movements, like a cable fly movement. I say that just because with tempo you can manage the resistance profile a bit, but with pressing you can't really challenge the fully shortened position very well with any pressing. Even with tempo, you can squeeze. It's like standing still and squeezing your glutes. Like you can feel them contract, but they're not under load.
You still see a lot of that though.
Yeah, people like to do that.
Big old glute squeeze at the top of a squat.
They like to do that at Fitness First.
Oh, mate.
Yeah.
Again, they're really after glute gains, those blokes.
Yeah. There's a lot of hip thrust going on in there. I saw a lot of that. So I think some kind of cable fly movement, just off the top of my head. And then probably for physique sport, more of a horizontal row over a vertical row, because looking for more of that V taper in the upper body, you're looking more towards the thoracic divisions of the lat, so the upper divisions of the lat, the teres, the traps, the rhomboids, things like that. So more of that upper back, that you're going to build out more of that width that people are really seeking. So whereas vertical pulling is good for total function, and the lat does attach to the pelvis, and it's good for just general pelvic stability to have strength within those like iliac fibers, or more of those the iliac fibers actually attach to the pelvis with those lower divisions of the lat, which are actually training when you train a more of a vertical pull.
Here we fucking go. Jesus Christ.
And so
this is great.
This is what we want.
Yeah,
So-
this is what we want.
awesome. So in terms of physique sport, though, I think it's great to build up more of that upper back. So if I'm actually programming for a physique competitor, I'm programming more of those horizontal pulls over vertical. Vertical just being there for function and stability, more or less. And you obviously want some tissue, because you can obviously see the orientation of the fibers when someone goes through a pose. But you can also a little tension goes a long way, and that's where like fast responders, like even when I had no idea how to train lats, I had fully developed lats because I'm a rather fast responder to really any volume. So enough overlapping volume, or even using my lats as like a stabilizing muscle group, was just all right. Even if I eked by a couple reps due to fatigue, and I changed over enough motor units or something, like work through that fiber's potential, or that muscle's potential in terms of what fibers I'm actually biasing through fatigue. I kind of had some overlap in the lats, for example. Lats are just a good one because people typically think they're training their lats when they're not, and it doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you not training your lats.
I really wanted to touch on this with you, because it's something that I sort of had been...
We guys still get the top 2, Angus.
We'll get back to that.
Can you put your question in the can?
Fuck, it's in the can. It's written down. I won't forget.
That's written down?
It's written
because I don't want to miss out.
No,
I don't
that's
want the
good. All
listeners
right,
to miss
right.
out.
No, I feel
'Cause
it.
this is interesting.
All right.
Let's see
All right,
this
so
with the lower body.
the other two, this one, the other two. So the posterior chain one is easier because I would go with an RDL variation.
That was the only one I guessed.
Yeah, that would go with an RDL variation because you're getting a lot there. You're getting calf from a knee stabilization standpoint. You're getting the hamstring, and you're also getting the glute from a hip extension standpoint. So that's a great one. And
Great lift.
Yeah, it's a great lift. It has a good stimulus to fatigue ratio, as Israel's coined. He's good at just coining terms.
Dude, yeah,
He's good.
He's got so many acronyms.
He's good at nomenclature, in giving meaning to a theory or an idea.
That was a great word. Haven't used that.
Yeah, fuck, haven't heard that
That's
one.
a
So,
fucking
tick
outstanding.
that for learning.
Yeah, there you go. And so I'm stuck more or less on the quad.
I've read on your IG a heel elevated trap bar deadlift.
Yeah, but maybe not for quads. But if you could only
Okay.
choose one exercise, that would be it.
Yep.
Just because that's probably going to train the most tissue.
So tomorrow I
From a
can maybe
functional
expect
perspective.
you.
What
to be
about
chucking that
simultaneously
out in the gym.
bench pressing while you leg press?
You do that, and
What,
tell
remember
me.
the old
I'm
school
just saying.
benches, Angus, where it was like an incline bench with the plate-loaded quad extension?
Oh, yeah,
These
yeah,
were
the
big
home
Australian
gym.
home gyms.
Oh yeah, like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
low
yeah.
flexes.
Could
and
you
shit.
smash that and be like, up, down, up,
Again,
down,
do
quad
that, film it,
yeah, that's a good one.
live stream it on Twitch, and
King of lifts.
see how it goes.
Hashtag king of lifts.
Yeah, exactly. No, so in terms of training most tissue in the most functional way, probably is the heel elevated trap bar, just because you're getting more knee flexion, so you're getting more quad involved, so you're getting glutes. You'd be getting some hamstring just from a stabilization from because the hamstring in the quad act as like a biarticular muscle in the sense of like it's not moving, but it is contributing to the load, or crosses biarticular muscle, just a muscle that crosses two joints. And so in terms of that, like that's a great one. And then you'd be challenging your upper body in general. You'd even be challenging your arm musculature from a standpoint of stabilizing the elbow and the shoulder. And so like that's a great one. The glutes are involved, all of that, and the calves are involved. So everything's fucking involved, like go on forever. But
So you are putting that in the king of lifts, or where?
no, that's not
The
like
big four. Fuck.
no. So I think for the last of the four, so the first one was some sort of cable fly movement
Yeah.
for the chest, just because
row.
so with the cable fly, just because over a pressing movement with a free weight, just because you can manipulate tempo and change in body position to change and manipulate resistance profile. In the ultimate, it's just with the resistance profile of the exercise itself. And then the horizontal row of some kind, I would prefer it be more neutral grip and more of a neutral wrist position, or a semi-pronated wrist position, just for the way that your upper arm is going to align and orientate with your musculature. So you'd hit more of the rear delt, the teres, some of the lat, anywhere in between. You can see where my upper arm kind of starts to orientate.
Yeah.
So that's going to dictate where I'm actually writing an article right now that goes over why your grip does matter in a row. And I just have an inherent issue with some people like coining exercises like this is a mass back builder, and it's like, yeah, but it does matter.
Yeah.
You know, like the upper, like a fucking barbell row, you can, whether it's underhand or overhand, does matter, because one, you'd actually train more rhomboid trap, as to the underhand you train more teres, for example, and be more aligned with like the rear delt.
It really is the science bodybuilding.
But
Yeah.
based off that, then, for a lot of your horizontal pulling movements, do you go to cables over barbells? Because barbell, you kind of fully pronated, fully supinated, whereas cable attachments, you have everywhere in between that.
Yeah, and that's where like Prime has done a great job at having their 4-in-1 bar, which credit to Kasim for coming up with the design for that, or the idea to combine basically, so you have the mag grips, right? So you have all those mag grips. So the 4-in-1 bar by Prime is like, it's essentially all those mag grips into one bar. So so you have the one bar that's about 20 inches in
Google this.
in length.
Yeah, pull it up.
And then so you have so basically it's adjustable, so where you can have all 4 of those grips, and you can adjust it really quickly. So it's just a turn, adjust, you lock it in place, tighten it, and then you can go neutral, semi-pronated, pronated. You can even go semi-supinated. So it really opens up a lot of options in terms of rowing movements. But yeah, it would be a lot more cable-based rowing movements. And then 3 again was the RDL, just because of what it can do for the posterior chain. And then the quads. So what I've landed on is the split squat variation. That is, again, I have to give credit where it's due. And Kasim from N1 enlightened me in terms of my way of thinking of this. And this is from a front foot elevated, rear foot elevated split squat. So the front foot elevation, you're going to get more of that front leg quad involvement because you're getting more knee flexion.
Is that just so front foot you've elevated just the heel
on a
or
wedge,
the whole
on a wedge,
thing?
just the heel.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay,
Yeah. So front foot on a wedge. Sorry. And then, so that would be super fucking confusing. I did not explain that well. So front foot on a wedge, back foot on like a small elevation box. And so basically what that's doing is on the front leg, you're obviously training the quad. You're training the quad very well throughout most of its range of motion. And then what you're doing with the back foot is you are actually training the rec fem on that back leg, which is a very important contributor and a part of the quad anyways, but also a very important contributor to hip extension and things like that. So and total pelvic stability as a whole. And that's something why like the leg extension is so important, because it's pretty much the only way you can train the rec fem in like the fully shortened position.
Interesting.
Oh yeah,
I wonder
like
if
flex
Cristiano
tip,
Ronaldo
extended
does
knee.
those.
Yeah.
Have you seen his rec fem?
It's juicy.
It's
crazy.
juicy
all over. One thing I wanted to ask though, because that's something I didn't know people even did up until 6 months ago. But then I hear some people, they always use the rear leg, and then other people sometimes just load up on the front leg. So one, do you always use the rear leg and to get that rec fem stimulation in your split squats? And then how does that affect your view of unilateral versus, is it just an asymmetrical exercise versus a unilateral exercise?
Yeah, it's a good idea. That's a good question. So I think that I always do it in a manner where my back leg rec fem will be challenged. Meaning I set myself up in a way where that is being most challenged. It's for the most part, in terms of pelvic stability, to keep your pelvis in place. I'm pretty sure it's going to be involved in some way. But yeah, I would always challenge that back leg rec fem. In terms of being a unilateral, just a unilateral movement, you mean just in terms of?
Because unilateral, I guess, in my mind, meant focus on one side at a time, but then all of a sudden you're still kind of using both sides. So is it now do we have a new category of asymmetrical exercises?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know if we'd have a new category of exercises, but it's something you have to take into consideration when doubling up or even supersetting 2 exercises together, because you're gonna have one. Let's say you go from a leg extension to a split squat. If you're trying to fully challenge the quads there. Well, if you're doing leg extension right and spending time at the top, squeezing that short position and making it difficult, and challenging that rec fem in a short position, for example, it's gonna be pretty fucking fatigued going into a split squat. So I'd say one side may get more rest than the other, and you may notice that a bit, which may make it a little asymmetrical in terms of that. So I would just be sure to kind of program accordingly. At least give yourself a little rest period in between.
I know Eugene Teo, when he's doing Bulgarian or rear leg elevated split squats, he takes about, I think, 30 to 60 seconds between each leg just to give it a bit of time to sort of reset.
See, I always train for performance. Okay. Well, I guess sometimes bodybuilding, but I always, Come on, Angus. So I'll always give myself equal rest in between each leg and overall sets if I'm doing like a split squat or as a sole exercise, so not supersetting. So if I have 90 seconds, I'll have like 90 seconds in between right, 90 seconds in between left, and then just keep it the same.
Yeah, and I also think from the split squat's a fucking hard exercise in terms of like, it's systemically very challenging. So in terms of like stimulus fatigue ratio, like, I mean, it's up there with like, it's got a good one. I still feel like it's got a good one, like the RDL. But it challenges a lot of tissue. And because, I mean, you're getting some big contributors there, not only from a stabilization standpoint of just balance, and then working on in terms of your I can't think of the exact word, but we'll just say maintaining your balance within the split squat position, and then your quads and your glutes, man, are just being torched, as well as obviously your calves involved there, again, to stabilize the knee. So fuck, like that's a hard exercise. So that's my big four. Yeah,
nice. I would have picked one. I would have picked
The
the RDL.
cable fly was a very edgy choice, but I love your justification for
huge
it.
justification.
Because I was like, whoa, what are we doing
There's
here?
a guy
I got
at work.
taught I had to earn flies. I had to just press.
That was your dessert,
Yeah.
but not from bodybuilding.
Yeah, not from a physique sport standpoint.
And that's why I suppose Angus and I've never participated in physique. But Ronnie, a guy from work, I gotta give him a shout out. If you train tomorrow, you'll appreciate him. He'll appreciate this. He loves his flies. Like he is the king of flies. And too bad there's not a fly for the calf, Ronnie, because you fucking need it, man. So but everything else is looking the goods.
Yeah, no. So I think flies too, because flies are also, you could really vary your flies. So again, based off your positioning of, you can train again, like obviously the pecs have 3 divisions, the clavicular head, which is the upper chest division, the sternal head, which is the mid chest division, and the costal, which is that lower pec division. So with flies, you can train all 3 of those quite easily in position to, you just have to be sure your arm path is according to the fiber orientation. So it's running along the same fiber line as those fibers are, your upper arm is. It's like for clavicular, for reference, if you're listening, like the cables would need to be lower, and you need to be, it's kind of like a front delt raise in a way, but you're not going straight up as much as you're going over in line with that pec, and then kind of like in line with those fibers.
Because it's just something I've never, like, we've all smashed flies as kids, Angus and I. That's how we go to sport. Like, I was doing an endurance sport, and at the time I'd be 16. I'd be like, I'm going to smash some flies. It's just because what you saw people do in the magazine.
Big pecs, more sex.
But it's it's interesting, like, hearing about the contraction and everything and what you have to go through to achieve that.
But
so sorry.
It's an interesting thing you touched on, because that's a subject where the pendulum has swung back and forth, at least in my experience in the fitness industry, is the targeting of aspects of a muscle group.
I think to just clear that, I think it's more about biasing a certain fiber group
rather than or that.
Yeah, you can. It's like the RDL. You can't take the glutes or the hamstrings out of the RDL. It's just, you can bias one or the other based off intent and setup of it and positioning.
But then based on what you've said about the flyer, you've inserted it into your big four, which to me is a unique perspective. Then from a programming perspective, does that mean you have people doing flies before pressing, or you still sequence your exercises traditionally how most people do, doing compounds into flies?
That's a good, So Danny Kennedy actually talks about this a bit. He asked me when I was on his podcast about how I would set up exercise order based off of like a hypertrophy based program. And again, in physique sport, it's going to matter less, I feel like, just because you're not relying as much on the total tonnage of intensity in pounds moved, essentially, in the total output of that that strength workout or a performance-based power or speed workout. So your neurological coordination is obviously going to be more fresh towards the beginning, and it's going to depend. Like, my answer to Danny essentially was, was kind of having to think about it on the fly. I'd never been asked that question before, or at least in the context of how it was asked. So my reasoning more or less was the more beginner someone is, then sorry, I had to burp. So the more beginner someone is, the more that all should be taken into account. So the neurological complexity of a movement or an exercise or even the workout as a whole should be taken into consideration based off someone's experience level. But if you're like we're talking like you're very confident in your execution, you're very confident in your ability to work into fatigue, then it matters less to me that for extension or for example, like a leg extension absolutely could come before a barbell back squat. But the context in which how I'm using those, like I probably wouldn't take either of them to failure. But if the squat was before the leg extension, I most likely would take the leg extension to failure.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So it's really based off of your ability to execute movements, your neurological coordination, your ability to execute, work into fatigue, and then your total fatigue management throughout the session.
And I suppose if you're working with a beginner, it's silly to get them to leg extend when the low-hanging fruit of teaching them to squat and hit more muscle groups is there first.
Yeah, and if they have a movement pattern. So also there's a period where, depending on, just from a personal training perspective, like if the client is there to, kind of depends on why the client signed up. So I would look at it more for, if the client came to me like, look, all I care about is results. I don't give a shit about all this other stuff. So if this is results based, purely focused on results, like, all right, then I'm probably not going to spend a ton of time worrying about your squat form. If you're shit at squatting, fuck it. Like, it's not that important.
Just take a seat and bang out some reps.
I'm going to put you in a really stable environment. So I'm going to work more into the hack squat. I'm going to work more into the leg press, the leg extension, things like that. To where, if you have if your squat form is shit, like I'm not going to spend 3 weeks trying to fix it. Like that's 3 weeks out of the 12, let's say you have, that we're just, especially in terms of getting buy-in from a client, like if 3 weeks goes by and all they can say is,
I learned to squat.
I learned to squat and I'm still fat, or I'm still scubby and I don't feel great.
Because it's a really sexy thing to say, like, oh, all bodybuilders should be able to do the compound lifts and like know their way around a barbell. But at the end of the day, like you said, if it is purely just about the physique, we need to stop romanticizing certain ideas, I think.
Yeah, and I think from a personal training perspective, if you're looking at a very much beginner, then what their ultimate goal is really important. Now, if it's a beginner that their goal is ultimately to become really good in bodybuilding and really good at fucking picking up load, then you should probably learn how to squat at some point. If this is your long-term goal. But if it's a gym pop person, just a lifestyle client looking to come in and just change the way they look a bit, like contract some tissue and create a deficit and see what happens, man. Like challenge them and worry less about how they look when they squat.
Because I think as well, like the justification behind a lot of trainers that I hear teaching the Gen Pop how to squat is that it's one of the key movement patterns. Like, you squat so much in life, but the technique behind squatting with a barbell and squatting down to pick something up off the floor, like you can be a bit more chill about how you pick something up off the floor. I think we're now starting to realize like you can't, if you do pick something up off the ground like you are squatting with a load on your back, you're probably going to be a stiff man and living in a life of pain, I'd say.
When's the last time you bent down and gave any consideration to how you did it?
I used to get way too up in my head about it, and I'd never felt worse when I was doing that.
So I can tell you right now that I guarantee you can walk down this fucking hallway and find like the first 10 people you see and ask them to bend down and pick something up. I guarantee you there's not a second thought in their mind of how they're going to do it. Like their nervous system.
In Australia, it's so drilled. There's signs everywhere to pick up with a back flat. So I reckon you'd see it here more than anywhere.
Yeah, probably. So in terms
America,
of
it might be different.
Yeah. So like in terms of
but I get what you're saying. I definitely get the point.
Your nervous system's so much smarter than you are.
Yeah.
Like so much smarter. And it knows its most efficient, safe way to do something. And so obviously, unless you're just being completely fucked with, and someone asks you to, like, this happens in science classes all the time, talking about like matter and stuff like that, like how like the size of something doesn't necessarily always influence the mass and vice versa. Like, I remember back in university, like there was this like little, what we would say like in the training world, like a medicine ball. There was one that was as light as a feather but looked heavy as fuck, and there was one that looked super light and it weighed a fucking million pounds. And how you would go to pick those up was based on the perception of what it looked like. And so obviously in life you're not being fucked with that hard. You know, like university professors set that up on, like, some asshole put that together and was like, I'm gonna fuck with some kids. But in life, like, someone sees a big box or like there's a chance something's gonna be heavy, like they're naturally gonna probably do something to protect themselves or get someone to help them or get a dolly, and if they get hurt, like,
and that's I think people you hear blow out their back at home when they're like lifting up a water bottle or something. So it's
and I think that has to do with something else. Like, fuck, dude, I took a step down a stair the other day and I felt like I broke my back. Like, and
I just got out of the car.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm in shape guy. Like, I can move well. I can squat really well. Like, if you saw my, movement mechanics, you'd be like, wow, okay, dude can move well. But when I step out of a car and like I'm in an awkward position driving or all, in a weird spot in general, sometimes shit just happens.
Do you have a complex now with picking up small objects? Do you always call for help?
Yeah, because
I'm lazy as fuck. I'll just leave that.
Sometimes I'll just like, I'll just leave that there. So I think as a whole, like, I think it's just, like, it all goes back to what that person's goal is, I think, and really asking them and giving them what they want, and don't project your needs on someone else. Like, just because
it's hard not to do.
It really is hard to do, or hard not to do. And I think a lot of trainers get into a headspace of comparing themselves to what other trainers are doing around them or in a gym. Like, I'm a very big observer in terms of when I go to gyms.
Can't wait for you to come to mine tomorrow. Hey?
Yeah.
I hope you should come down at a real busy time.
Yeah, so
chaos down there.
Yeah, so I just love to observe and see, like, how people are training in general. Like, yesterday I observed this guy. So I was doing just tricep extensions, and I was watching this guy, like, during my rest periods. It was just these two dudes training together, and one guy they were doing a lat pull down, and the first guy had a fairly controlled way of doing it, execute it fairly well. I mean, in terms of changing anything I wouldn't have changed much in terms of, like, you're getting most of what you need to do, and you're not gonna hurt yourself. Like, you're fine. You don't look like a complete asshole. But his training partner, looked like a complete asshole. And he was, the whole, like, if you're looking at the right and wrong way to do it, like, he would have been the video for the wrong way to do it, like swinging everywhere and
no
just
retraction.
like just nothing happening at all, other than, like,
movement of weight.
There was a movement of weight happening, yeah. And his friend was like looking at him like the whole time. I was just like watching his friend like watch him execute it, and like midway through, he's like, I don't think you're supposed to be swinging like that. and so people, like, I think people like intuitively do things.
True.
Mate, when did
he come to
he was just bringing some athleticism into it. His body just wanted to be efficient, so he just recruited every muscle in his body.
Yeah, but anyways, like, the whole point of me bringing that up was, like, I was watching other trainers, like, and I saw other trainers looking at other trainers during their training session, and I was like, why does it matter what he's doing? Like, unless you're like waving or like, what's up, dude, or like doing some stupid inside joke you have, like, I get that, but
that's just such a Fitness First is a very strange environment like that. Not so much your one, but even to a degree. Whereas my gym's more of like a country club style gym.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see what you think to take that in.
Yeah.
With bodybuilding, it's pretty interesting because we've just spent a great deal of time talking about how the human body is very good at coming up with movement strategies to solve problems. But then with bodybuilding, we're faced with this kind of counterintuitive idea where we've got to try to specifically move things in an inefficient manner to generate tension just on one muscle group.
Yeah.
Like, how the hell do you wrap your head around that? Because some of the ways you've described to activate muscles are that counterintuitive to me, or at least like of how I was originally taught.
Yeah, I think it's how it's being taught currently. and there are people out there teaching it correctly, or at least on the right track for sure. And so I think to think any muscle can function in isolation is inherently wrong.
Oh, there, yeah, that's me fucked up. I
So
fucked up there.
yeah, and no, I don't think you fucked up as much as whoever was educating you on it didn't understand it as fully as they needed to articulate the information. And that goes back to my post on education over belittlement, and that's to the honestly to the root of me, like what I truly believe in. And I think this is an opportunity where, again, like I talk about, I made a post over education over belittlement, where people would use as something like that to either belittle you because you're doing it wrong, or to belittle who educated you on it. And I think our roles as educators and people who want to help move things forward, it just comes down to, how can I produce a piece of content that is going to educate both parties without belittling anyone?
Well,
like,
no one's wrong on purpose.
Fuck no, like no one wants to be wrong. Who the fuck wants to be wrong? Like that sounds stupid. Like who really wants to hurt someone else or bring them harm? Like I think money clouds judgment, but as a whole, I think people are inherently good, and I don't think they honestly want to harm anyone.
Yeah.
So money may cloud their judgment in doing something that otherwise they shouldn't be doing or aren't qualified to do, but that doesn't mean they're seeking out trying to harm someone.
Yeah. Martin McDonald put it really well. Like, this doesn't necessarily apply to bodybuilding and like biomechanics, but as far as why someone like I can't remember what his name is, he's like the body coach or something in the UK, and he was saying that calories don't matter, blah 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 blah, but he probably knows that that's wrong now, but he's got to the point where he's so big, he employs 10 people. He can't just come out and be like, boys, I was wrong. You all got the sack because I have to start afresh. Like, I built this whole brand off not calorie counting. Yeah. Now I've realized calorie counting is the way to go to achieve your body composition results, but we've built this brand off not doing that. Like, we can't just throw it in the bin. Like, once some people with their brand, they go too far down the road, I think that's what sort of keeps them off the track.
Look, man, people at one time, some of the smartest people in the world thought the earth was flat, and some people still do.
There's probably more heading back that way, in fairness.
Yeah. Right. So that's in every fucking part of the world. So whether calories fucking matter or not, the earth is probably not flat. So, at the end of the day, like, as long as we're still breathing, it's like that's all that really matters. But I see what you mean, though. I took that in a weird place. But I think...
Well, technically, I believe in the flat Earth, Australia doesn't exist. So here you are.
We're off the edge.
So where are we?
We're beyond that. Well, we're a government conspiracy. I think there's different sects of the flat Earth movement, but at least the one I sort of explored, because that was. I was like,
you jump on the plane to
because
Australia.
To prove something wrong, first you have to pretend it's right and work backwards from there.
Yeah,
so I was like, all right, Earth's flat. Now let me sort of work backwards from that. And they're like, Australia doesn't exist. I was like, all right, cool, I'm out.
I live in Australia.
It's beyond the ice wall, I think it's considered.
Yeah. So it's too north.
Yeah.
It's too north for understanding. So
should we get into our scripted questions?
I just quickly wanted to touch on the lat thing, because I've been abducting my elbows, thinking that would help me recruit lats better. My lats do sweet fuck all, especially on the left side. And then I went to a CrossFit retreat recently, and they were going through some gymnastics progressions. And when I was doing a pull-up, they were constantly cueing me to more lever myself back to initiate the pull-up. And all of a sudden, I finally felt my lats. Is that one of the more common errors you see when people are trying to target their lats? Yeah, because I see it as a problematic muscle group for a lot of people.
It's very problematic. And so in terms of the lat, so if you're looking at what has leverage, so you just need to give the lat, you need to give any muscle you're trying to train leverage. Give it an opportunity to contribute to something. And so the lat is obviously right here. It's in a position where, like, the lat one of the responsibilities for the lat is it attaches back here in the back of the upper arm.
All the way there?
Right there.
Yeah? Right. That's way further along than I thought it would.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to attach somewhere in here, right? So the main part of the function of the lat is to actually pull the humerus. So if it's all the way, like, I can still initiate there, but also what conflicts things is the teres attaches in a very similar place as the lat. So out here, you could be using the teres to actually depress the humerus, to whereas here you could actually be using the lat. And again, it's a thing where you just get good at actually like creating this movement to depress the humerus, more or less, because the scapula doesn't necessarily need to. Your scapula does what it needs to do. Again, you're no smarter than you're a quarter as maybe as smart as your nervous system is. So, and that's for all of this. So in terms of like, so if I was to give you a counter force, so go all the way up. So like do this. Now depress against that. That's depressing the humerus, which then, if you bend your elbow here, a bit, come down. So if you depress there and actually think about pressing down and back a bit there into like that force, down and back, you're going to engage more of that lat a bit. It's hard sitting down.
Do you rate, for people who are really trying to maximally shorten the lat, do you rate then if they're training it unilaterally to flex the trunk, like laterally flex it to get the full shortening, or is that not an aspect that's necessary if you're just trying to hypertrophy the lats?
I think you can eke out the last little bit of a contraction that way, but you got to be sure that that's the last part of the movement, not the first one. So don't start with that and then go through the pull down or whatever. That's going to be the last part of it. So once you get to your end range, then you can do kind of a side bend there if you're doing a unilateral.
I'm so keen to get back to work and smash my lats.
Yeah, but so talking about leverage there, like you got to look at the anatomy and understand where that fiber orientation is. So if you look at the lats, like they're a fan muscle that actually fans up, and it fans up into one point of connecting or attaching to the humerus, the back of the upper arm. And so way in here, well, I can't really use anything there, so that lines up really well with, if I was to pull something here, I'd probably use something up here, so maybe my teres, or I'd pull it back with my upper back, so like my rhomboids, traps. Okay, that makes sense. But if I was pulling something more down and in front, or in this plane, nothing in my upper back really could help me do that. Well, what does this in your back? Well, your lats do that. So that giving something leverage is very important, and giving it an opportunity to do work. And so this is where setup becomes huge. Setting yourself up, you can really help yourself do a lot. And I think one of the most confusing parts of trying to give a shit about execution is actually not spending enough time setting yourself up properly. And so if you're not setting yourself up properly, you're going to fight against yourself the entire time. Because again, if you're trying to train your lats and you're way out here in a position where ideally you're set up to train your upper back really well, but all you're trying to do is train your lats, the whole thing's just going to suck.
Fuck.
Just
So
because
go back to good old bodybuilding. Think about your bodybuilding days more.
Yeah.
So, just try and think about things logically a bit, and break them down to where you're setting yourself up for success. And lats are just one where setting yourself up for success is a huge determinant. Because even like coming down to training your lats, like again, your lats attach. So if you're looking to do more of a pull down movement to train those lats that do attach to the pelvis, well, it's going to be since the lats do attach to the pelvis, it's going to be very important that you have a counter force to give, which means, so if on one side our pelvis is being pulled up by the lat, well, that means by default we need something on the other side to stabilize that pelvis so we can create force within the pelvis. So our abs need to be engaged.
So do you need to throw as in you pull up on the...
So you would just compress your abs can also attach to the front of your pelvis. So the abs are pulling up on the pelvis this way, your lats are pulling on the pelvis this way, and therefore like you're getting this tug of war essentially, but you're stable enough on both sides, both things are engaged enough to where you can create force on one side. So yeah, I mean it's the sense of like a tug of war. If the difference between playing tug of war when, let's say, you have a rope attachment attached to a steel hook on the wall, well, fuck, that's gonna be really easy to yank because, or you can create a lot of force there because it's attached to a wall. Okay, now attach that to a resistance band that's attached to the wall, something that's not very stable.
Yeah.
Well, it's gonna be really hard to like
generate some
tension and force because that's gonna constantly be kind of yanking back and forth. So That may be a good or bad, terrible example. I don't know, but
so when you jump on the lat pull down, engage those abs.
Yeah, so
pelvis position.
Yeah, so you want to stabilize the pelvis. Is basically what I'm getting at. So if your goal is to train the lats, it's a really good idea to stabilize your pelvis. Pay attention to stabilizing your pelvis and getting in a good position to, again, gain some leverage for your lats. Put yourself in the best position to allow those things to contribute to the movement. Now, if you want to train your upper back, then it's actually somewhat advantageous to actually hyperextend and let those abs go a bit.
So with a single arm dumbbell row, you'll often see some people you see with their feet on the ground, they're sort of leaning onto the rack. Mm-hmm. That seems like a good way to keep your pelvis stable. Whereas then maybe where you've got one leg on the bench and one arm on the bench and one leg on the ground, is that probably a less optimal way to do it if you're going to try to target those fibers? Or is that just a poor exercise in general to target those pelvic fibers?
That's a poor... it's just a poor exercise in general to really train the lats. And I've changed my view on a lot of these things over the last couple of years just because I've learned more and more. And so at one point, I would have taught the dumbbell row. I always learned it as this is a lat movement. And now I would never program really the row for a lat movement as much as it's a really good upper back rear delt movement.
Yeah, because you see a lot of people these days not doing it with much elbow bend, really leaving
more of an
down.
arc row.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's so much better ways to train the lats, and that's not one of them.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's your go-to king of the lats exercise? I know you love context, so let's take context, throw it in the bin for a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to make your life easy, so you don't have to worry about someone geeing you up after this, being like, "You said this was the best lat exercise. I don't have wings yet.
My lats are small."
Yeah, you know.
But then you refer to anatomy, and you've been doing it wrong.
Yeah, so I think it just depends on, again, it's going to depend on the division. I know context matters, but it's going to depend on the division of lats you're wanting to train. So that's where your setup is huge, and where more of a horizontal row is going to train more of the thoracic or lumbar division, so more of the lat that's more of the upper lat. And then you have those divisions of the lat that actually are a little bit more vertical, and those are the iliac ones that actually attach to the pelvis and the more vertical fibers of the lat, and where you're actually training more of the vertical pull down, which does make sense. It's vertical lat fiber, training lat vertical pull down. So in terms of total, it's going to come up to genetically, it kind of depends on which one how your fiber orientation is. Like, what do you have more horizontal fibers? Do you have more iliac fiber, like horizontal or vertical fibers in your lat? And that's going to be genetic. You look at guys like Kai Green, and he's got a lot down there. He's got a lot down there, but they're very horizontal.
Okay.
Like if you look at his lats, there's a lot of horizontal. Like he's got a great fan, but most of them are going to be horizontal. So just for an example, like if you go look at Kai Green's back, most of those lat fibers are going to be horizontal. But in terms of physique sport, I think doing horizontal rows, neutral grip horizontal rows with good setup and good execution, I think you're going to get probably the biggest lats.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are we throwing out a 2-to-1 ratio, horizontal rows to vertical rows?
In terms of
that frustrating.
Fuck your ratio. Horizontal. The push-pull ratio.
Yeah, we've had a big.
For shoulder health, for building a rig, maybe different.
Yeah,
shoulder health.
Yeah. Guys, this is purely bodybuilding stuff right here.
Yeah, and in terms of total muscle function, just make sure you're training your other side of it. Be sure you're training your pecs. Make sure you're training both pecs. So meaning that is pec major and pec minor. So the pec minor actually is going to attribute to shoulder health and attaching to the scapula and keeping that pinned down to your back because it's just very important. I won't get too far into that, but it's very important to have good pec minor health, and that also plays into your serratus anterior, for example, and a lot of those assisting and synergist muscle groups that attribute to kind of all upper trunk health.
The pec minor is like the bastard child of the upper body, same as like the hip flexor, where everyone was just stretching it, inhibit for so long. And I think guys like you have been the big proponents of like, no, let's train everything.
Yeah.
Seems like a smart, like sound logic there.
Yeah, and you just feel stronger. I think you feel more sound. I found less injury within it. And again, how can I do? It's not that I don't like to train really hard, but I like to train really hard to the point where I know I'm not going to be overly sore. I hate feeling like I got fucking hit by a truck. I just truly hate that feeling, and the rest of my life takes a hit because, like, I still gotta, like, when that was my only life, like bodybuilding and like school. Okay, cool. Because I didn't really give a shit about school that much, so awesome. But now that it's okay, now I got to worry about my business. I got to worry about relationships. I got to worry about having energy to go throughout my day in general. I got to worry about the longevity now of my life as I'm, in my upper 20s now. Like, it's time to really give a shit about things like that. So I think as a whole, like, I care more about creating a sound physique to where, like, I don't have many physical goals in terms of like how I want to look as much as if I had one physical goal of like an external goal of like how I look, it's purely probably like, if anyone has said anything about me, like, yeah, he just looks solid.
Well, mate, you've ticked that off the list.
Yeah, he just looks like a solid guy. And it's just like, okay, cool.
Life goal,
I think the beard helps with that
Angus,
more.
what time do
than
you
the
have to
muscle.
get, Abby?
Man, I've got time. You think I have sessions? You'd be
All right,
wrong.
well, how comfortable do you feel packing this up?
Not really. I'll have a crack. I just wanted to get what before you leave because I feel like this could help you as well. Actually,
Okay,
no.
sweet.
Or just your
Whack it in,
curiosity.
and then we'll get a quick run through the
You were
top five
commenting
athletes.
on
Oh, sorry.
Kai Green has a lot of horizontal lat fibers when you're looking at his back.
If I can remember correctly, yeah.
Yeah, can you, off the top of the head, think of anyone who has a lot of vertical fibers, just so I can go home and have a look? It's okay if you can't. It's a bit of an obscure question to ask.
Yeah,
you gotta cycle through
One
the
thing
Rolodex.
will be really interesting for you to go look at though, would be I love and respect John Meadows a lot, but John has very overdeveloped teres and rear delts.
Okay.
So if you want to look at someone that is overpowered by
Someone who probably does lat pull down like this.
that, and does a lot of the Meadows roll. The Meadows row.
Oh,
is,
the heaps.
It's very rear delt teres dominant. So yeah, man, he's done years and years and years of training his rear delts. And
If
teres.
you name a row after yourself, I feel like you got to rep it at least every second day. So I kind of understand how he's fallen into that.
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at, and there's, I don't want to single out John, but like if you look at, who was it? I maybe I'm speaking like Dexter Jackson. Maybe there's some other guys out there that really have these, like their teres has a teres which has a teres, like
Yeah, okay.
and where their lats ideally are supposed to be, there is a lat there, but like their teres is almost started to overlap the lat.
But then is it going to be hard for them to then recruit their lats once they're at that stage, because the teres will just be like, I'll do it.
Yeah, probably. But then again, like, as long as they can function all right and move about life, it doesn't really matter.
It's all good.
Because muscles are there to create function. Like, they're not there to look like anything. I mean, if you look at, like, I have a huge interest in evolutionary biology, and if you look at, like, in terms of our evolution from primates and of itself, like, every muscle would have had a function in its evolution. So, and plus those bastards are hairy, so you can't really see their muscle definition. So,
have you ever seen a hairless chimp?
I don't think so.
Bro, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like their arms is like
Fuck, this is turning into an episode of Rogan.
But anyways, no, it's so in terms of like my interest in that field, like that's a whole separate thing. But I think it's interesting to me because we can look not only at even like neurobiology of why we'd have, for example, see exactly how jacked is that fucking guy?
So jacked.
So all of those muscles, like none of those are there, right? So like none of those are there for physique look though. Like that's not what they use for like, oh, I'm attracted. Like that's a sexy chimp, right?
Like how crazy is that?
Yeah,
Like even the muscles around the front of its
He's
scalp.
stage lean as well. That's
Right.
the
And
crazy
just
thing.
He's 4 weeks
massive,
out for
like
sure.
so much testosterone flowing through those bad boys.
he's on steroids for sure.
That doesn't help. That doesn't hurt. Sorry, but yeah, that's just so jacked.
Yeah, so each muscle though would have to function, and so like as long as, so if the teres is now, let's say theoretically like doing a lot of the job of what the lat could do, who gives a shit?
Look at those nuts.
Natural testosterone.
That's
Dude,
crazy.
he's just sitting down to take a load off his back.
Yeah, over his massive nuts.
It's like walking around attached to a belt squat.
Yeah. All right, let's get those top 5
All right,
athletes.
man.
I got 10 minutes.
You got 10
How
minutes.
many
Yeah.
sessions? You're on 20 sessions a week now. You're in the big boy
Finally
bucks.
there.
Finally there. So, yeah, I had to actually think about this. So I haven't. I watch. Sports were a huge part of my life growing up. I grew up in a huge sports family. My grandfather was a college football coach my entire life. So I grew up in locker rooms, in whether it was high school or mainly college locker rooms. So, and around just that sport as a whole, and just around sports. So each family gathering for me is based around like, well, what sport's on? It's not like, okay, we're all going to come together and just see each other. It has to be revolved around, well, what game is on.
I wish our family was like that.
And so it's just, I come from a huge sports background. So I grew up watching a lot of sports. But as of recent, as I started to travel 3 years ago, I kind of just like, that was one of the things that was inessential that I kind of just gave up, that I don't do much anymore. But I'll definitely still catch a game if it's on, and if I can watch it, I'll definitely catch a game. But so, number one is LeBron, just because he's, for me, he was the first. So in high school, that was actually the first book other than an academic book that I read, was LeBron James's biography on how he, kind of his story going from high school to the pros, and kind of like where he came, like his background coming from a kind of a pretty broken home and moving in with a friend's family, or like the coach's family, and just he didn't really have much going for him growing up, and kind of that story of him becoming this freak athlete in high school, and being who the fuck he is now, right? Like one of the most exciting people just to watch in general. One of the craziest athletes I think on the planet, and I think you could ask him to do anything and he'd be a monster at it. In terms of just his speed, agility, he's fucking jacked. He's 6'8". You know, he's just like.
Can throw and catch a ball well.
Right, like what the
Being that big and coordinated is a rare mix.
He was, just for like context too, like he was an all-state wide receiver as a sophomore in high school.
He would have destroyed some poor kids.
Right, like you got to think too, like this dude could play whatever, and he just
He's good
basketball was like what he went with. So LeBron's probably the most exciting for me to watch. If a game's on, like I'm definitely gonna catch it if I can, just to watch LeBron. Very exciting to watch. Number 2 being Allen Iverson.
Nice.
So just I wrote down as a note, pound for pound menace.
Short, but still 6'1".
Yeah. So I think it's argued that he always lists himself as 6 foot, but I think it's argued that he's closer to 5'10", 5'11".
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
So I think he's kind of one of those guys that's fibbed about his height most of his life, and it kind of stuck.
Well, I met Kemba Walker when the national team was out here, like the B grade team.
Yeah.
And there's no way he's 6'2".
No.
That's what it said. Like, no way.
Yeah. Yeah. So most of these guys have gotten through like by lying, right? They pound the stats. So let's say he's 5'11", 160 pounds. And dude fucking ripped it in the NBA. Like,
Was he in the era of when Shaq was on the court?
yeah, he was in that era.
That's messed up.
I think he was like an 11-time All-Star. So I think he played 14 seasons, and he was an All-Star for 11 of those. But even when he went to Georgetown, he played 2 years at Georgetown and led the team in scoring, assists, and steals at Georgetown. And like in terms of winning, like he won. Not only could he score and pass, but he also won the defensive MVP award. Like,
that's ridiculous.
For a small guy.
Dude, for someone that small playing those guys, like he was just a fucking disruptor, and I love it. Like he was a menace pound for pound.
And the whole practice shenanigans, like, that was great.
Yeah.
That was the best.
Yeah, and so he's since obviously people in their time obviously are relative. And this next one, it's relative to the timeline as well. So Reggie Bush, when he was at USC, if you're familiar with Reggie Bush,
Yeah.
I know the name.
So
He dated
running.
Rich Kardashian.
He
dated one of them, right?
Yeah, he dated Kim, right?
I think so,
yeah.
yeah.
Nice.
So, anyway,
Pre-sex tape.
Yeah,
Oh,
pre-sex, pre-Ray J, I think.
Yeah.
So anyways, Reggie Bush at USC. So the dude, it was like, so if you're playing a video game, Reggie Bush in college. So if you're listening to this, YouTube Reggie Bush USC highlights. It was like if you're playing a video game, everyone had 80 speed, and Reggie Bush had 120 rated speed. Like, he was so much faster than everyone else that you could literally watch these highlights, and the dude would run across the entire field, decide that wasn't a good idea, run backwards to run all the way across the other side of the field, to then run halfway across to juke someone out, then to run backwards again to elude 2 defenders, to then run 25 yards and outrun everyone still for a touchdown. And so I think that he only played like something like 14 games in at USC, but he's like 10th in the NCAA in rushing yards.
Jesus.
He played 14 total games at USC, and he's 10th all time in rushing yards.
That's
like, this
crazy.
dude just was a fucking beast.
Yeah.
And just obviously his NFL career didn't go as well, and he had some trouble in terms of recruiting allocations that took his Heisman and national championship away, which is unfortunate, which I think played into most of that NFL shit. But Reggie Bush at USC, like, if you guys don't know who that is, YouTube it, and you will have a fucking field day at watching him.
Gotta do that when I get home.
Make everyone look like a fucking idiot. Kobe Bryant 4th, purely for his work ethic. So it's like Kobe Bryant as a person, I don't know as much, but Kobe Bryant and his work ethic, I think, is something that's very notable. That's a lot of people can take from it.
Yeah.
Like, it would be hard to find someone who outworks Kobe Bryant or outworked Kobe Bryant. Like,
I've read half his book is sitting red down there.
Yeah?
And that's probably why it'll stay, because it bored the shit out of me after halfway.
which is fair. Like,
Because he's just working hard. There's nothing
He's just
exciting
working.
about hard
the
work.
young stuff when he was in Italy with his dad and how
Yeah.
much of a renegade his dad was in the league, that was interesting. But then when
Yeah.
it got to like NBA stuff and we all know about him and Shaq, that's when it lost me.
yeah, and it just obviously, like, all the drama gets in the way, but Kobe and his work ethic, like, I don't think you can. It'd be hard to match someone or outwork someone like Kobe.
Yeah.
And obviously, dude could play some basketball.
Oh yeah.
Right?
What, 61 points in his last ever game?
81.
81. That's mad.
He went.
Is that a record?
Nah.
No, Wilt Chamberlain has the record for 100 points.
Still, like, even though they surely would be like, let's get him up in the points, it's still crazy.
But also, Wilt Chamberlain was 7'1" and among people like where the league average was maybe like an average center was like 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And,
And
like, you
it
got
probably
Wilt
wasn't
Chamberlain,
as
who's
stacked
like,
as talent.
no, you got Wilt Chamberlain, who's like fucking 7'1", right? Like,
Just destroying.
destroying everyone. Like, his triple double was like, I think when he scored 100, he had like fucking 50 rebounds. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, it made no sense. Like,
Just 2 bounces and he was back up the other
it
end.
was so stupid. And honestly, most of those rebounds are probably getting his missed layups. But 5th one, a little oddball, but and a change from the rest. Number 5 is Shaun White.
Snowboarder.
Yeah, snowboarder. So
Can surf and skate as well.
yeah, so he can surf, he can skate. He pretty much changed the trajectory of what snowboarding is, of what we know it as an X Games sport and just as a whole. So I think Shaun White's incredibly talented, and I also think that watching him. So I was watching as he was preparing for I think it was the X Games where he scored a perfect 100 for the first time ever, or anyone's ever done it at the X Games and in the half pipe. And basically, in the training leading up to that, he nearly died. So you can look it up, Shaun White injury wreck or whatever, half pipe, what a tragedy, whatever the fuck it's labeled. But he basically went up. I forgot what he was doing, but he landed. His neck landed on like the
I
ridge.
remember that. Yeah. Don't need to watch that
Yeah,
again.
and the dude like almost fucking died.
Yeah, I
and
remember
to
this.
go back after recovering from that to train to go to score the first 100 ever in X Games half pipe history is like just the mental fortitude that would take.
So many top level athletes, once they get rattled like that as well, don't come back from it mentally.
How the fuck would you? I'd be a pansy ass. Like,
I guess you just accept death and like lean into it. You're like, fuck it.
I mean, at that point, in an extreme sport, like,
Doesn't have a family. He's all
You're
good.
there for a reason.
that's like like a guy like Travis Pastrana doing the the first trip. What is it? The first
First double
backflip. Sorry.
Yeah. And since then,
since
that guy
then,
can do one.
yeah.
Whoever's walking around now.
Whoever was scraping the fucking
that
side
bloke
off
down there.
Yeah, that guy was doing triple backflips.
I like that. That's a good top 5.
Yeah, man. I had to give it some thought because I was just like, fuck, I don't know, man.
That's what this show's built on.
Do you have a party trick?
No.
Oh, no one has a fucking party trick.
My party
wrap this up, I just gotta start packing my
What
bag.
do I do? Do I just shut it off?
So, yes, this is the most important thing. Unplug everything, click stop recording there, stop streaming,
Yeah.
and then bring this to my work.
Really?
Yes, this is
Alright.
one thing we can't.
Alright.
Everything else I'll sort out.
All right, cute.
And then unplug all that stuff.
All right, sweet.
Mate, let me know about tomorrow.
I will.
It's been
Absolutely,
a pleasure.
man. Absolutely. So I think in terms of party tricks, like I'm not a huge social guy when it comes to all that. My party trick is to how long can I stand in one place?
Nice.
And how many people ask me about my beard?
Well, that's bodybuilding in a nutshell as well. Like once your workout's done for the day, it's just about going into full rest and recovery mode, right?
Yeah. I think to be a good bodybuilder, you have to be able to fucking chill.
But then when the time's right, go hard.
Yeah, and I think it's a big part of really learning how to manage your sympathetic like managing your nervous system. Like how do we, as someone who can turn it on when they need to, and then how do you know, like how can you immediately switch it off?
So do you think mindfulness is a good practice for bodybuilders, or it's probably a bit of overkill to do like mindfulness specifically outside of the gym?
I think mindfulness is an important practice for humans.
But do you get it through like explicit mindfulness, or do you do it through just things where you switch off and you can only think about that one thing that you're doing? Because like in some regards, some people would consider lifting weights as their mindfulness practice, whereas some people are doing that and then also, sitting on a rock, legs crossed.
I think wherever you can gain presence and calm within a moment, I think that is a practice of mindfulness. So for some people some people that's lifting, for some people that's a long walk, some people that's sitting on a rock or doing whatever they do. But as far as that goes, man, I think it's important for you to have quiet within your life in some degree, and it doesn't have to be guided meditation. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It could just be a long walk. For me, sometimes it's just a long walk with some noise-canceling headphones and some classical music, and that's my mindfulness for the day. That's my presence practice, and it allows me to think about shit and remain introspective and think about how the day went, how I want it to go, how I wish it would have went, and then past that, like once I kind of get that over that first fucking part of what I got to think about and deload that, I just kind of allow things to free flow in my mind, like output, like what comes out. Because it's funny, like you notice this when a lot of say like when people are, I think we can kind of compare it to when you're bored, but I think we just compare not being overwhelmed with boredom now.
It's crazy. Like, yeah, for me to sit there, like the few times my phone will run out of battery or my headphones will run out of battery, feels like bloody torture. Or like even eating without being entertained these days is something I've noticed because I have issues with appetites. I'm a slow eater, so my leptin and ghrelin have too much time to regulate, and I think that ruins my appetite because I'm always watching stuff. But then to just sit there and eat, it's quite a challenge, which is embarrassing to admit.
Yeah.
Like just that need for like constant stimulation. It's fucking heavy.
Yeah, man, I think it's important for anyone, really, even yourself. Like I would, if things are like, if there's things that are weighing on you, things that are making you anxious or anything like that, I would highly encourage to learn how to separate yourself from that attachment to any type of stimulus like that, like any type of stimuli that kind of keeps you away from any type of boredom at all. Because I don't think you have to seek out boredom per se, but I think it's important to experience boredom, because I think your perception of things can be skewed if you're never bored.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I think you don't have time to
It's just to create variability, right?
Well, that ends like
if you can't be bored, then how excited relatively can you get if there's a baseline level of excitement or stimuli always present?
Things do get skewed a bit. Like, I think that a lot of, like, obviously we live in a very exciting time. Like, there's so much going for us, right? Like, the happiest in terms of, we live in the most fortunate time to be alive in terms of all metrics, in terms of murder rate, death,
even just surviving
war,
birth.
violence, survival, life expectancy, availability to medicine, like all of these things, right? In terms of the entertainment boom, like the technological boom that has happened, like we're so entertained all the fucking time.
Fuck, here we are adding on to it. Go, everyone, shut your screens down now. And 5 minutes of boredom, please, before you get back into this.
So, like, what I encourage people to do, and like what I encourage people to do, honestly, is after some of my podcast episodes, I'll just encourage people to sit there for the next 10 minutes without anything. And if it helps people, that's why I kind of say play classical music sometimes, or play something that's...
There's no lyrics to pay attention to.
Right, so, or some low-level, like, house music, whatever kind of, like, if classical, like, I have some classical artists that involve some elements of that, like, kind of low frequency house music into their classical genre, which is for me, it's very stimulating. It's very relaxing. But then just pure classical music, typically piano, the cello, things that have like a low, or either peaceful hum or a low frequency, that it's not like really exciting or like, heavy on full on violin or some shit like that. Like, that's almost too much. Like,
so some classical music, it'll get you going.
Yeah, and some of it's made for that, right? Like, because at the time, like, they didn't have EDM, right? Like, they had to get pumped somehow, right? So
there was definitely no 140 beats per minute back in the day.
Right? So,
like, they definitely would have laid it out very differently.
Yeah, so the important bit of where I'm getting at is if you can't just sit in silence and that just makes you super agitated and anxious, then turn on something that's relaxing and stimulating, or at least relaxing, and just fucking sit there for 10 minutes. No distractions, nothing to take your mind away from what you actually need to think about. And I think when we're able to limit the input that we allow to come in, it frees up some space, and it frees up time and bandwidth to have more of a free flow of output that needs to come out. So in terms of the concept of like limited bandwidth, like, so if we work off the theory of limited bandwidth and mental capacity, like, well, that means there's only so much input and output that can come in. If we're doing nothing but inputting content or material or entertainment, then there's very little space for any output to happen.
Yeah.
So how do you form your own opinion or thought on anything?
Well, that's one of the hardest things to do these days, even just trawling through Instagram, just constantly seeing other people's ideas of fitness and just never really getting a chance to step back and just stew on the ideas. Or even more so, like, I think there's a really nice culture these days of upskill in the fitness community. Like, it's way more emphasized. But then now you've got these people, they've literally been a trainer for 2 months and they're already booking like course after course after course after course. And there's just no moment where they just sit and implement instead of just gaining new ideas, but just sit and just let it all stew away in there and like let some stuff drift away, maybe let some ideas like attach to other ideas that you've picked up along the way.
Yeah, which is, I think, a big part of like in a question that was like on the agenda for today was like something like that, or advice for trainers or online coaching or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and honestly, it comes down to, be sure you are educated, but also once you're educated to a degree, like, spend time implementing. Have an application phase where you don't take any more information in. So if you go to a course, or you go to 2 courses, or you spend, let's say, the goal for the rest of 2019 is to take a couple courses, then try to spend the first part of 2020 like not going to any courses. Like, just implement. Just be within that implementation phase of ironing out what works for you, what works for your clients, what clicks in your mind, and then take what's working well, scrap what isn't, and go back to the drawing board of like what gaps do I still need to fill in maybe. But yeah, I think people typically spend too much time learning and not enough time actually implementing the material that they're learning, and it becomes this. I think that's just a part of our consumerist culture and this constant achievement for more and more and more and more. So we think more is always better. So if I've taken 2 really good courses lately that could lead to, whatever, this much knowledge, then what if I could take 5 courses that would lead to this much knowledge?
Yeah.
And 10 courses that would lead to, and then you never spend any time actually getting experience within your field. So I think it's important to, if you want to segment it or you schedule it out in some fashion, like try and do it. But what I try to do, one of my buddies, Cody McBroom is his name, one of my good friends who's a really good coach and owns a really good business. He has a motto with his team that's produce and protect. And so basically they'll have a 3-month period where they'll have goals and projections to produce. And then it's like a 3-to-1 ratio. Like they spend the next month protecting.
Yeah.
So that means take a step back, be with your families, go on a trip. If that's your holiday, go on a holiday. We're going to spend this entire month not putting out anything because you've spent the last 3 months putting out weekly articles, weekly
just
videos,
spewing it out,
spewing all this shit, right? So like, which I really like that motto. So like, let's spend, if you spend 3 months. Or if you spend 3 months working and applying, and then maybe dedicate a month where you're focusing on learning, where the bias goes to learning, and then you spend the next 3 months trying to implement and apply that learning. And that's been a helpful thing for me, at least.
Yeah, that's definitely some great concepts there. The last question before we wrap this thing up and give yourself a bit of a plug so people can find you and continue keeping up with your stuff. What is something you would change if you could go back in time and start afresh?
I often think about this. That's your 3rd good question today.
Thank you. I'll take 3.
3. That's his 3rd good question. So if I could go back in time, there's a couple trains of thought, right? Like there's one where if you change anything,
the old butterfly effect.
Yeah, like you change one thing, like where I'm at, I wouldn't be in this room right now recording this podcast if anything changed.
Should we bend the rules and say, in a vacuum, if you could change one thing and it wouldn't have the full-blown butterfly effect? Because I feel you there.
Yeah, man, because like that's a hard one just because there's so many ways to approach that one, right? Yeah. So in a vacuum, if I went back and changed one thing, I haven't really thought about that. Probably how long I stayed in a toxic relationship. Honestly, like it affected a lot of my life.
How many years was the relationship for total?
4.
And how many years was it toxic?
3.
4. Okay. So it was a good year in there.
I think.
Man, it takes a lot of balls to end a relationship. I've never actually, it's something I've struggled with in the past. Like usually I would just, rather than ending it, I would just steer it into the rocks so they would end it. Like subconsciously without realizing. That was about reflection. I realized that. But yeah, it takes a lot of balls.
Yeah, man. So I think ending that, because like that was basically the last 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of college,
which is a pretty key time in someone's development.
Terms of your social development, and I missed out on a lot of cool hangouts and opportunities and getting to know some people a lot better and becoming a lot better friends with some people. Because of a big part because of a relationship that I allowed just to take hold of my life.
Did you have mates saying you need to dump this girl, or was it just they sort of left it up to you to figure it out?
People didn't challenge me too much.
Because I've never been in that position, but I know at least friends in my circle and in Oscar's circle, we've definitely had been in points where we're like, dump your girlfriend. It just sort of, if anything, drives them closer together.
Yeah.
So I was curious to see what your experience was like there.
Yeah, no, there's definitely been.
And that's such a hectic thing to do to someone as well.
Yeah. There was definitely people telling me throughout that thing throughout the relationship, like, look, I think she has you fooled, but look, I know her.
That's nice in retrospect.
Yeah,
but at
like,
the time probably wasn't.
Oh, I think back, and I didn't hate those people either. Like, those were my friends too. It was a lot of females, honestly, telling me because they heard the female versions of these stories, like the raw, like
the locker room, the
locker
female
room
locker room talk.
Yeah, so like, there's just a lot of shit that went down that I just wasn't aware of for the longest time. And then once I figured it out, and I was just like, really, wow, I've been in a fucking hole. Like I put my head in the sand, man. Like I had no idea. And so. Yeah, man, I think if I could go back in time and like change one thing about my life, nothing professionally. All my ups and downs have led me to where I'm at now. And although there's been incredible stressors and times of emotional lows and a lot of anxiety within the past couple of years, like I think that's essentially made me adapt and grow and recover and become better because of it. So it wouldn't necessarily change any of those things professionally, and I've learned a ton, and I've become a better coach and educator because of it. So, wouldn't change anything like that.
Does your anxiety increase as your audience increases, though, as you feel more responsible to like refine your information and delivery?
So my audience, I think, peaked in 2017, and my audience has been shrinking, I think, ever since. So no, I do feel responsibility to put out good and valuable content. I think that's just a responsibility of any sort of educator or coach that tries to claim or be a positive influence within the industry. I think you have somewhat of a responsibility to put out good information and put out sound, either logical or somewhat, evidence-based, whether it's backed by literature or just backed by sound logic and rational thinking. Then
well, that's the issue. Sometimes it's hard to observe certain things that we know through common sense and logic, and then observe that under the scientific model and sort of marry those two worlds. And I think it's ideal when you can.
It's ideal when you can, and I think that's a part where the evidence-based community is lacking currently.
I've been fucking ranting about this.
Yeah, it's just there's practitioners that are very well respected that I respect even that are, if it's not in the literature, it doesn't exist, and it's just like, I don't agree with that though, and again, like I could be I've heard one of them say it literally at a seminar, like to us, like if it's not in literature, I don't use it. It doesn't exist to me.
But then you just cuck yourself out of so many strategies. Because especially it's not really our world, but in the physiotherapy world, like with the biopsychosocial model emerging and people sort of getting around that, then any sort of study because then the whole idea for a good study is you need a big cohort, but then everything's so personal under the biopsychosocial model. So those things kind of conflict when you're trying to design studies, right?
Dude, that whole thing, right? Like why, and it's just studies are fucking hard. Science is hard. And the whole research part of things is super tough. And I'm honestly not interested in it. I'm interested in the literature that comes out, and I'm grateful for the people that do it.
Yes.
But I don't want to be one of them that does it.
I totally agree with you.
And so, like, I have a good friend, Miguel Blacut, who is currently going to Columbia and does work, is going to do some work with Cambridge, and just a brilliant fucking kid. And he's, like, lives and breathes literature. He loves and lives and breathes research and wants to be a contributor to that and do the research, go through all of that and all that meticulous, mundane shit that I just find boring and I don't want to do it. But people on this earth like Miguel do it. And so it's like,
I'm thankful that they exist. And guys like Luke as well, like he sifts through a
guys
lot
like,
of research.
Yeah, so you got guys like
he
Luke,
has
right?
that appetite.
Yeah, he's got the appetite for that research and for that literature to read more of that shit. And like I subscribe to Luke's site. Like I want to hear. I'm trying to like I was talking to Luke actually about this morning, more or less trying to find my place within the industry. I really enjoy educating others, but I don't identify really with any party. or with any one religion of the industry. So like, I mean religion in the context of not spiritually or believing in a higher power, but religious in the sense of like us versus them thinking, like more of a dichotomy of thinking. And so when it comes down to where I want to land, like I'm always somewhere in the middle of most things, and I'm very neutral, and I try not to get on one side or the other.
Which is tough to do because as well, I think everyone identifies as that, but then being that is truly difficult.
It's difficult because, and so there's people that are like, that's where the whole like argument of you're an evidence-based practitioner if, and it's like, and there was like, I think when there was the original roundtable of like Eric Helms, Greg Nuckols, who was it? There was an Australian on there.
Oh, really?
I'll think of his name. Bodybuilder, lives in Sydney, actually.
Oh, I was going to say Jacob Shepis. Okay, yeah.
Evan Goebel, actually. It wasn't Jacob at the time.
Scott Goebel? Or Evan?
I think it was Evan.
How jacked is he?
Jacked.
I know. Okay, anyway. Someone Goebel. I thought it was Scott Goebel. Okay, Evan.
I could be wrong too. I think it was Evan. Anyways, and then there was one other person on there. I couldn't remember who it was. Maybe like, I can't remember. Anyways, like they were going through like what it meant to be an evidence-based practitioner. This was a couple of years ago, so I think it's evolved and people have opened their mind up a bit to the point of that. But like, there were so many like if this then that ways of thinking that I just disagree with. Like, and I think that you corner yourself into only thinking one way. But I subscribe to many people's ways of educating. So again, like I was an educator, with N1 for a year and a half or so. And so I educated with those guys in terms of looking more towards the execution, biomechanics, anatomy side of things. But I also, I subscribe to the evidence-based side of things and looking at, not that that's not evidence-based, but it just comes from a different, if we're looking at the continuum, it's at a different part in that continuum. Yeah. It's science-based, but I wouldn't say it's within the same religious stature as the evidence-based community is.
Well, because like when let's say function of the lats, we've been talking about it today. I'm sure there's a bunch of studies that show certain people did this exercise for lats, other people did this exercise for lats, and then based off the results in that study, they'd be like, okay, therefore this exercise is best for lats. But then there's your approach where you're like, well, the muscle starts here and the fibers run this way and then they attach to this thing. So let's get this moving to this and it'll work it, right? Like you don't necessarily need a study for that, do you?
No, I think it helps to have it, just to solidify it and get some scientific, I guess the scientific merit to it. And it can help maybe learn something new or just solidify what we already know, which that's what a lot of research is, man. Like a lot of research is just based in, hey, this is a theory that we've had for a while, let's try and prove it. Or this is a theory we know to be true, let's prove it.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of studies come from. And so like training studies are really hard because you're getting a sample size or a group of people that if they are, let's say they're trained individuals, right? If we're looking at a training research study.
It's hard to get those.
It's hard enough to get trained individuals, but it's hard to get trained individuals that have been educated on enough on anatomy, enough on execution. Like, so let's say you do a squat study. Well, you have people in that study who are 5'6". You have people in that study who are 6'5". You got people in that study who have super long femurs. You have people in that study who have super short femurs. And so in terms of looking at, and then you have everyone's variability within their execution and past injury, movement mechanics in general. And so if we're looking at a squat study that says, does the squat train more quads or glutes? It's like, that's a fucking relative question. Yeah. Based off of what?
Yeah.
On average, well, let's look who's in the study. Like, and then you have to look at, you have to look at how many people dropped out, and then what's your average sample size of who stayed in the study. And then it's just like, it's so hard. Like, there's so much variability within training studies, even to like, you don't have the resources of manpower to do the research, to do the study, to you don't have enough like researchers there to be in the lab or be in the weight room to monitor these people's execution to keep them on point. So you just take their word for it. You take, and
that's to get
you
one
take
study.
EMG, and you take EMG research, which is again faulty, and has to be looked at pretty relatively, because it can be fairly skewed. Just EMG research in general is picking up electric activity. Like,
yeah, I don't like it based on which is such a terrible thing to say, but just based on my preconceptions of how certain exercises activated certain muscle groups, and then what I saw in the EMG studies, it just was a bit too much of a leap away from how I thought it was, or what I thought the results would be, to the point where my instinct just said that EMG doesn't feel like an accurate way to measure it. Like, is electrical impedance going through a musle different to creating mechanical tension in it? Or
well, that's kind of where and so that's kind of where it mixes up with there being electrical activity, so there being a sense of sensation. So like, I could theoretically contract my glutes really hard in a position where they otherwise would not.
So big glute squeeze at the top of a squat, for
Right,
example. So
right.
that would register on an EMG, you standing there just squeezing your butt cheeks.
Yeah, but you can't measure tension going through it. And then I think one, like a real controversial one, which is like frog pumps, or like the glute exercise. Like the frog pumps is, a pretty controversial one in terms of realistic glute activity. Sumo deadlifts, sumo squats, like things that are overly abducted to a place where you're just at a disadvantageous position for your glutes to even do work.
Yeah, okay.
So that would work, in theory, like you'd be working more piriformis, other parts of the glute, maybe like smaller parts.
That's interesting.
Like the minimus or
versus going through range of abduction and adduction is what will probably better stimulate it more than likely, right? Rather than just being abducted.
Yeah,
maximally.
or in terms of looking at the glute max, like you got to look at what glute you're trying to work as well, right? So if you're looking at the glute max, that does really good well in hip extension. So you need an extent of abduction to get into a good place to max out range of motion based off your structure. But like, you're gonna work in the sagittal plane, or in the sagittal plane. Like, you're gonna work forward and backwards really for the glute max, because that's how the glute max really functions.
Yeah.
Right. So we wouldn't try to do any other circus acts to train the glute max.
Yeah, it's unnecessary or superfluous.
Yeah, it's pretty unneeded in my opinion. So yeah, we get off on that tangent, but as a whole, man, it's tough. So I try to find myself more in the middle of the equation if I can, and I like to pull from a lot of different educators, and again, take a step back, form my own opinions, try to go with what not only the literature is saying, but also what my logic is saying, what is my bullshit detector saying, like what are all these things telling me, and what feels right, and what's working in practice. Like, if I'm programming this for a client, am I seeing the results that I'm looking for? If yes, then...
Well, that's the weird thing where, like, everyone used to say results-based PT, which I think is a cool idea, because it's like, did you get them what they wanted? Whereas now it's evidence-based. So it's like, well, I didn't get them what they wanted, but I did what the evidence said. Yeah. Like, then you suck. Like...
Yeah, and I think it's just and I think the results-based PT, especially like, you got the companies like...
probably bro science did ruin it a bit. Like, we were taking the piss a bit before and probably didn't have enough of that evidence base.
Yeah, there was a lot
of a collective.
There was a lot of pro science and pseudoscience kind of thriving within that.
But now I feel like we've got that guilt that's sort of making us run into the arms of science almost too much.
Well, I think people just are apprehensive to do anything without... Oh, okay, I'm not going to try that because I have to check.
Well, then you're just in the PubMed tennis, I call it, of the comments section.
Yeah.
And that helps no one.
That helps.
And I've done it. I've played PubMed tennis. I'm good at PubMed tennis.
Yeah.
I'll even like inbox my mate who's like, he's better at finding research than I am. I'm like, hey, I'm in a sick PubMed tennis match. Help me out. Feed me through studies that I don't need to read.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, man, it's tough. So I just try to stay somewhere in the middle. But I'd say as a whole, like, try and I guess the piece of advice out of all this rambling is spend time learning and educating yourself, but also spend time applying it and seeing what actually what you enjoy. Spend time what you actually enjoy, but also what you actually find works for you and your clients. So I think that's huge.
Fuck. I appreciate you giving us so much of your time. I realize you're on holidays technically today, right? Like this is personal time. So
yeah, man.
Thank you very much. I'm sure our listeners will get a lot out of this. A lot of the stuff you're talking about is really in line with some of the subjects that previous guests have been touching on, but with a little bit more of a physique twist. So I think everyone will be really happy about that. And can you let people know where they can keep up with your stuff? So it's Austin Current on Instagram. Is there anything else? Do you have a membership site or anything?
No, not at the moment. So in terms of staying up with me personally, I go where people pay attention. So for me, that's Instagram. So yeah, just at Austin Current. If you search at Austin, I'm fortunate enough to be pretty much the top guy.
Well done.
Well, yeah. So if you search Austin, you should find a red.
Austin Powers, then it'll be Austin the city.
Yeah.
Then it'll be Austin Current 2 under that.
That's right. So if you just start searching Austin in the search box, and it should be a bearded guy come up. I got a long red beard, and that's
most
me.
Trustworthy fitness information sources tend to have, in my experience.
Yeah.
You, Luke Tulloch, that's about it, really.
And
anything coming up people can buy tickets to?
No events really. So in terms of, I guess, consuming or listening to more stuff, other than Instagram, my podcast is a fun experiment.
Oh, what's it called?
Life Beyond Fitness.
Life Beyond Fitness. I'm going to download that. I have a big commute every day, so I'll get through some episodes of that.
Yeah, man, it's super cool. So the premise of that, just really quick, is basically I was pretty. I thought that there was enough fitness podcasts out there, essentially, and people were doing a good enough job at just distributing and communicating this information.
Yeah, you got like Revive Stronger and all that.
Yeah, and I've had Steve Hall on the podcast.
Yeah.
So I thought people were doing a good enough job at this. And so you have Revive Strong, you got Stronger by Science with Greg Nuckols and Eric Trexler, and those podcasts are phenomenal, right? You have Iron Culture with Eric Helms and
Greg Nuckols and Eric Trexler. It's like one of my favorite combos.
I love that podcast.
Greg Nuckols was like the first legit guy I got onto. It went like Mark Ripito, who's a little bit like, how you going?
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if it was through him, but through that circle, I found Greg, and I was like, that is someone who's stayed with me, or something I've latched onto, and just, he's never let me down.
Greg is brilliant. He's got a brilliant mind, and I think he's got a good approach to all of it.
Because so many guys, you look up to them, and then you just watch them go off the rails.
Yeah, they follow the money
like
a bit too much.
Poliquin and, you know.
Yeah, they follow what they see as a moneymaker, things like that, and where they can trademark something, or with like the BioSig or something. But anyways, so
fuck BioSig.
Well, R.I.P. Charles. But
look, he did some good. Some good.
Yeah. So anyways, the podcast is all about just people's life beyond fitness. So I think, again, to a degree, people want to hear a divert away from the same people talking about the same topics on different podcasts.
Because there's definitely a meta that swirls around all the shows.
Yeah, like if a new study comes out or there's something new talked about, well, if it's protein research, we're gonna go towards maybe like one of the top guys in that community, like Eric Helms, will talk about it, or if it's like RIR, RP based, we'll talk maybe to Eric or Mike Zordos, or if it's strength based, maybe we'll get Greg on, or so and then they just go around and keep talking about the same studies or the same perspectives.
Dude, BCAAs, I'm so over studies on BCAAs. I just don't care anymore.
Exactly, and I think that's the good approach of fuck it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter if you take them, it doesn't matter if you don't. Fuck it.
Yeah, let's put BCAAs to bed. Let's put the money into different research, something that hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, that's
the world will be a better place.
I'm on board with that too. But essentially, I think most of these guys are these enigmas. We want to know more. For example, I was talking to Luke this morning. Luke's super into
cooking and
cooking and playing guitar and reading fiction, like fantasy, and he's super into a bunch of other shit other than research-based fitness stuff.
Well, even
So-
Greg Knuckles, now I think he only posts cooking.
Yeah, and so I was about to reference that. Like, you know, like I want to have Greg on the show and ask him more about like ask him more about the cooking. Like,
Well, the brining tip was huge.
Yeah,
Brining chicken, like so many bodybuilders get, or just anyone who's trying to get their life in order or get into shape, eating dry chicken breast.
fucking sucks, man.
Guys, look into follow Greg Knuckles, but brine your chicken before you cook it so it stays juicy.
Yeah, it's a good helpful tip. But anyways, like, so knowing more about, like, learning more about the people behind these viewpoints or these other podcast episodes. So like, it's super helpful, obviously, as a practitioner and coach in the industry. Like, I need also to consume this content of people going over these research studies and reviewing and doing roundtables. And, you know, I'm very fortunate for Jeff and his ability to communicate research, and Jeff Nippard, and also to use his powers for good. Like he's used his,
because he could sell some bullshit supplements if he wanted to,
and he's used his popularity for good. And I'm really, not that it fucking matters, but I'm really proud of Jeff for that. And I'm happy that he's doing it in a way that he's doing it. And he also he's got the manpower to bring people together that otherwise maybe never would have, in terms of like roundtable discussions, and it gets massive reach, right? And I think that's powerful. But I also think people focus too much. People lose sight of what life's really made up of, and how fitness is such a small part of all these guys' lives.
Well, I guess the idea was fitness was always to facilitate more life so you could live longer and do more of other stuff. But then all of a sudden, fitness just became the focus for a lot of people.
And if you talk to, I mean, like guys, again, like the guys we keep mentioning, like Greg Knuckles, Eric Helms, like all these guys, like they're into a bunch of other shit. Like, what books are you read? Like, what music do you listen to? What movies if you travel, like, where's your favorite place you travel? Why is that? Like, what significance has that had? Like, what is there? So, like, there's so much more to fucking talk about outside of fitness, really. And so, but the main gist of the podcast is, like, so much of my life within fitness has been made up from my life beyond it.
Yeah.
So all the travel I've done, the different continents I've lived on, my experience over the past 3 years with my wife, and all the experiences leading up to that, all have shaped who I am within the industry. And all of my time within the industry has shaped who I am beyond it. And so it's like this, you can't have one without the other. It's the yin and yang. And
I think it's a really appropriate time to drop my favorite quote by Musashi. I got it off Joe Rogan, so he's the one that exposed me to it. But it was, know the way broadly, and you shall see it in all things.
Yeah.
Because I got really, really, really into Olympic weightlifting. Like, I was just so obsessed with it at a point. And then, like, you just see aspects of that show up in other things. Like, weightlifting's all about patience and other sort of virtues that you find it. And I think I agree. It's like fitness can kind of become the lens through which you view life, and it helps influence those other aspects as well. But it doesn't always come back to fitness, and it works the other way around as well.
Yeah, and you need both, I think. You need a good ground of a solid foundation of fitness to some degree, and it doesn't have to be strength training. It could be whatever you enjoy. And as long as you are in a place where you're healthy and you feel strong and good and capable, like, fuck yeah. But yeah, that's what the podcast is really about. So life beyond fitness. So between there, Instagram and the podcast, and then the website. So I co-own a company called Physique Development.
Who's the other coach? Or are you the only coach, and there's just
No. So
some money bags funding it?
No. So Alex Bush and Sue Bush. They're married, and so Alex Bush I co-founded the company with Alex back in 2014, 2015, and we recently brought Sue on as as a coach.
Doing well. If you're
co-owner.
employing more coaches, that's great.
Yeah, no, it's been going well, man, and they've been working hard, and they're both great coaches, and it wouldn't be where it is without them as well. So it's been a great team effort to build it where it is now, and so physiquedevelopment.com is where you can find us there.
Nice.
And one-on-one coaching, but we're also just launched our group coaching offer.
That's cool. So how does that work? Just people with a shared goal, you just pop them on a similar program?
Yeah, so we have currently, the way it's structured is we're going through some beta testing currently because we just launched it, so we're going to kind of iron out the details of it. But Each month there's a male and female program that's put out. Typically, it's going to have a few different aspects within the programming of the 4 weeks, and so you'll have some sort of metabolic component in there. You'll have some sort of hypertrophy component and some sort of neurological strength type work.
Nice.
So working towards getting people exposed to different styles of training and understanding that there is other places that you can spend time and be productive within training.
Well, for people who've purely been focused on physique, there'll be some low-hanging fruit there in the other pathways.
Right. So they've overtrained a lot of stimulus or a lot of stressors in one particular system or stimulus, and so just exposing people to new and different ways of either exercise selection, set combination, rest period, manipulation, tempo. So it's exposing people to a lot of this, and for a lot of people, we get a lot of people that they want to be a part of what we're doing, and that's super cool, but not everyone can afford the monthly price, which we understand, and that's fucking life.
But it allows you to make it more accessible without watering down your service too much.
Right. So the group coaching is like, it's $125 a month.
That's pretty damn cheap for someone on your level.
It's super cheap. Yeah. So it's like you're getting access to us as coaches. We help you with your nutrition in terms of we have it set up so you get access to a calculator that we've set up based off of all the research and literature that's out there, and we try to set you up in a good place from a macronutrient calorie perspective, and we give you some tools to know how to manipulate that based off of training that we're currently doing, and then we give you the training, and you're there in a group, in a community to ask questions and have access to us. And so that's our group coaching offer that we just launched. That's, if you're out there and you can't afford a coach and you at least want something, then that's a good option to
there you go,
out.
Guys. So when's that beta testing now? When does that launch?
So the beta testing, like we've had a small group this past month, so October. It'll officially launch, I guess, November, and November, December, really start looking out for it.
There you go, guys. Just in time for the summer shred.
Yeah, exactly.
Down in the Southern Hemisphere, anyway. That's where you're tuning in.
Right. So I think the biggest goal is to have it ready for the new year. And the new year, obviously, for any fitness business is...
I can't believe 2020 is coming up.
Yeah, so the new year for any fitness business is a good time, and it's a good time for people to make a change and to be committed to a new goal. So I think that's our biggest goal, is we want to work to iron out a lot of the kinks. As of right now, there really hasn't been many kinks, thankfully. Just a good group of people in there testing it for us. But yeah, November, December, January, kind of like we're looking to really roll it out. So I mean, you could look for it in November. It should be officially on our website at that point, but I don't think any big launch is happening until like the new year.
Exciting times. But thanks so much for coming on, guys. Follow Austin on Instagram. Go to his website. Have a bit of a geeze. And yeah, if you came for some group coaching, get stuck in, or one-on-one if you've got the cash.
You got the cash flow, man. Go for it, man. Happy to have you.
Thank you very much. I'll see you next week, guys.
See you later. Yeah, man. I'm glad I could make it. Yeah, you guys got a great